There are new developments in the massive cyber attack that U.S. officials say breached federal agencies and critical infrastructure. Microsoft reports the attack targeted dozens of government systems, think tanks, non-governmental groups, and IT companies around the world. Most of them, though, here in America. The Associated Press reports the Feds suspect Russia is behind the attack. U.S. officials also say the attack may have gone undetected for as long as 9 months. News Nation Washington correspondent Joe Khalil has been tracking the latest responses from lawmakers. He joins us now live from D.C. Joe?
Yeah, Joe, and as you mentioned, it could potentially have been up to 9 months. We just found out about this last week. But back in September, this report was presented to Congress. And not only does it have remedies potentially for a hack like this, but it also laid out how we were vulnerable to it. Well, Congress actually did listen. They took this report and they acted on it. And there is a bill now on the president's desk that they believe could make a difference. But we're not exactly sure what the president is going to do with that information next. Nearly 3 months before cyber officials learned of a massive Russian hack, a government report warned such an attack was possible. And to stop it, even recommended Congress create a cybersecurity czar in the White House.
We have a very sick system, and there are practices that are crying out for Congress to act.
And in fact, Congress did act. Lawmakers authorized a cybersecurity czar at the White House as part of a large defense policy bill. And that bill remains on President Trump's desk. He's promised to veto it.
I'm thinking that the most important thing with the cybersecurity problem that we have right now is to pass the defense authorization bill.
Republican Senator Jim Inhofe is one of 49 Republican senators who voted for the bill. He says he'll vote to override President Trump's veto if it happens. News Nation uncovered this little-noticed 67-page report, which made the cyber recommendations from the Government Accountability Office, a nonpartisan watchdog agency. In it, the GAO suggests a, quote, comprehensive national strategy and high-level centralized leadership for national cybersecurity, and said major cyber hacks during the Bush, Obama, and Trump administrations have highlighted the lack of cybersecurity leadership as an enduring challenge. Senator Inhofe tells News Nation the defense bill is critical.
We got stuff in there that directly relates to addressing that type of security.
Friday, the White House's Brian Morgenstern tried to reassure the public about the White House's response to the hack.
We'll not get into too many details because we're just not going to tell our adversaries what we do to combat these things. But rest assured, we have the best and brightest working on it. Intelligence officials briefed lawmakers Friday morning on the hack. Members of both parties said they didn't learn much from it.
Quite frankly, I think the level of specificity that I found in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Journal is much better than what they brought this morning.
We need to know what our security protocols have been. And it doesn't sound like, that we can't get an answer to that.
Now, the bill we're talking about that would create a White House cybersecurity czar is the NDAA, that large $741 billion defense policy bill. Now, we know it passed already with bipartisan support overwhelmingly, and Republicans think that there is enough support to override the president's veto if he ultimately decides that that is what he wants to do. But it brings new light to this bill and the importance of the NDAA, especially now that we know about this hack and potentially what could come next because of it. Reporting live tonight in Washington, D.C., Joe Khalil, News Nation.
Joe, thank you. And joining us now to talk more about the depth of this hack and the implications moving forward is J.J. Green. He is a cybersecurity expert and the host of a national security podcast called Target USA. JJ, I got a lot of questions for you, but let's start with the latest news. And we are hearing that some are now saying, some experts in cybersecurity say that the hacked networks will have to be burned to the ground. Shed some light on the cleanup efforts here, the mess that was created, and what happens to these systems that were hacked.
Well, here's the thing, Marnie. This is still underway. This hack is still going on. People just still aren't sure just how far, how deep, how wide this goes. We know, as your reporter said a few moments ago, that this started 9 months ago. We found out about it just a little more than 9 days ago. So the Russians, or whoever it is, we do believe it is the Russian intelligence agency, SVR, they've been in these networks for months, and they've been trying to steal, they've been trying to learn, and they may even be trying to manipulate information in these networks. And think about where they went: State Department, DOD, DHS, Treasury, Commerce, Energy, all of these places where sensitive conversations were underway, and they most likely were trying to leverage every single bit of information they could get out of there. So it could very well mean that all of these agencies are going to have to start from the ground up, but it's going to take a bit before they get to the bottom of this.
And how concerned are you that there were some red flags apparently along the way and that this went undetected for so long? And where were there lapses in our system potentially that didn't catch this and bring it to the forefront?
Well, we've known about the possibility for this, as that report from the GAO said. We've known about this for years. In fact, about 4 years ago, I did a series of reports called Anatomy of a Russian Attack about the 2016 presidential interference operation that the Russians launched. And Dr. Christopher Paul, a very smart social scientist from the RAND Corporation, told us that. He said, the Russian intelligence services are like chess players. Russians are chess players by nature. He said, we need to think about this way. He said, they are dozens of moves ahead of us, and we are going to have to play some serious catch up to deal with this. So where we are right now is a situation where authorities recognize and understand that this was underway for a while. What they need to do right now is to figure out a response that's going to have to deal mostly with tracking down who did it, tracking down what their capabilities are, what they're going to do next. And I've been told as well, a response may not be, a cyber response may not be good enough. Some people are talking about the possibility there may need to be a physical response to this.
JJ, much is being made of the lack of response from the White House and from the president at this point. President-elect Joe Biden has come out and said we need to disrupt and deter our adversaries from undertaking significant cyber attacks. He went on to say potentially imposing substantial costs. My question to you is, what kind of response is necessary right now and moving forward from the United States to get that message across to these hackers?
Well, you know, as I mentioned a moment ago, there are those that are talking about a more forceful response as opposed to just a normal cyber response. But there's this very distinct possibility that some other message may have to be sent to the Russians, and it may be a kinetic kind of message, but they have to be very careful about this. I'm told the sources that I've been speaking to and the experts in the intelligence community have been telling me the U.S. needs to tread carefully when it's developing whatever response it's going to make. It can't push too hard because this is a different kind of beast, dealing with Russia and its disinformation and all of the things that it does. You know, a physical response may be too much, but a cyber response may not be enough. But there are those who do believe it's possible. The U.S. has some very good offensive cyber weapons. They need to use them, and they need to use them judiciously, carefully, and they need to use them soon.
The president of Microsoft, Brad Smith, put out a blog in the last 24 hours. He said more effective national and global strategy to protect against cyber attacks is necessary. And beyond that, information sharing has to change. So moving forward, what will happen as nations communicate, the public and private sectors communicate with these IT systems?
Yeah, you know, one thing that is absolutely going to happen, I'm told, is there are stovepipes that exist in this world, the intelligence world right now, just like there were these stovepipes, Intel stovepipes after 9/11. They're going to have to be broken down. They're going to have to be centralized, I'm told. And this is going to have to start with a White House czar, someone at least close to the White House that can run these operations, but somebody who, and I'm told as well, it may not necessarily mean one person. It may mean a team of people, a bipartisan team of people from both political parties that have expertise on this, but someone with expertise and import who can actually pull all of these agencies together, because this, I'm told, is one of the most impressive, or wrong word for this because it's so bad, but one of the worst intelligence failures in modern times. So it's going to take a lot for whatever it is the incoming administration decides to do. It's going to take a lot of voices, a lot of people, a lot of know-how, all pulled together in one place, one central repository, and deployed in a way that it's systematic and effective.
It is certainly an alarming wake-up call. JJ, before I let you go, and as we wait to really understand the scope of this hack, I think many people at home are wondering, how does it impact me? I mean, you look at the vulnerability right now during the pandemic, our healthcare system. What is the takeaway for people at home, and what can they do to get involved, to advocate, to protect themselves and their own security?
Well, the first thing I would say, based on what I've learned from the sources and the people that I speak to, is if you hear something and you have some questions about whether this is true or not, double check it. Don't just take anything for granted. News or information that someone tells you or is something you see on the internet, double check it. And in terms of what people can do right now, more specifically when it comes to being safe during this time, is remember and understand that what Russia's done here is this is an act of war in some ways, and their objective is to harm the U.S. and people who live here. So the Energy Department, the power grid, that runs straight through there. There's also the Defense Department, military, operations. There's also keeping the homeland safe. There are all sorts of things that are taking place, that could be taking place, that the Russians may know about. So what people need to do is to learn as much as they can from credible and reputable sources about what's happening and learn what they need to do, which primarily is keeping up themselves on what the real truthful information is that's going out about this hack, and staying in front of what that means for them, their communities, their banks, their homes, their schools, their hospitals, all of the things that are important to them. They need to make sure that they are safe and secure to whatever degree they can do that. And the main way they do that is by staying in front of the information, real truthful information, by essentially double checking their news and information.
Critical advice tonight. JJ Green, we're out of time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.